Wonderful. Hello. Hello, anyone that's joining us out there in the YouTube universe. Oh, do you know what? No, hold on. Don't sidebar 5 seconds in, Tom. It's the worst decision that you've made. No, actually, I'm sidebarring. It's happening. There's this wonderful YouTuber who starts all of their YouTube videos saying, "Hello, people of the interwebs," and I feel like that's where I was going with that. That anecdote was terrible. Let's hope we speak about more interesting things in the next hour. Welcome to the Dangerous Dialogues, and this week we are speaking about drag as part of Pride Month. I'm very excited to have this conversation and to have two wonderful contributors with me. I was about to point at them, but I kind of realized they're going to be at different places on each screen, so I'm going to go like this, and eventually my fingers will land somewhere that they are. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they know them better than I know them. So I'm going to chuck us over to Matt, Bev, to introduce yourself.
So, hello, I am Matt. If you've been following for Pride Month, you have seen me before. If you are just tuning in, I am a drag artist. I'm non-binary. I go by any pronouns. That is me. Yeah, and that's basically myself. A drag artist. There you go.
Love it. Yes. And Missy.
Hi everybody, I'm Missy The Point. I'm also a drag artist. Well, right now I'm out of drag. I'm very sorry. I had a really long day yesterday. Anyway, yeah, I'm Missy The Point. I'm a Mexican drag queen. And yeah, it's a drag artist. That's a better explanation. So I have more or less 2 years, almost 2 years doing drag. Well, I'm quite happy with what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
Amazing. So I kind of want to start us off by asking for the three of us what to us drag is, because I guess drag, lots of people have different perceptions of kind of what drag is, and I guess the meaning that it takes to a different person. So I'm just really interested in what drag is for both of you as drag performers and drag artists. Matt, I'm gonna just chuck back to you again.
Oh, brilliant. Well, to me, drag is a postmodern art form that is ever changing with the world and the views and politics of the world, really. Yeah, I think that's basically what it is to me. Personally, that's like an overall, but personally, like, my drag is very driven through my thoughts on gender and society and I don't know, feminine attributes of beauty and a lot of love as well. And it's also a lot of politics goes in with it, but
yeah,
that's also another side story to what drag is as well. So yeah, that's how I feel about drag.
Nice. I like that. Oh, there's so much juice to unpack there already. And Missy, how do you feel?
Well, I actually read that drag is some kind of art. I really like to say that it's only a kind of art because it is actually a combination of all the possible art that you can put inside, and it will be drag. I mean, yeah, there are still some like specifics that will tell you that something will belong to drag or it will belong to something else. But in general, you can do anything you want. I used to explore that part of me. I mean, out of drag, I do not do arts. Well, I do it by as a hobby, but not as a professional thing. So drag for me is like my escape to try this artistic side that I have in me. Also, I completely agree as well that is something very political. I mean, there are drag performers, drag artists that are not into the political side of drag, which is completely understandable, but the origins of drag go for that thing. So I agree that we as drag performers have to create, well, we don't have to create, but we should be creating a statement, a political statement. Against what? Well, we have many topics here to go against. So that's my perception about it. And also, I think there's some kind of, I don't know if the correct word for it will be catharsis. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I'm saying a Spanglish word again. So, yeah, I think there is some kind of therapeutic art because if you do perform as something that is not your usual self,
Yeah.
you can start to explore that part of you and realize who you really are, because it's at the end of the day, that's you as well.
Mm.
So I find it like as a therapeutic art as well.
Oh, I love that. I love that idea that it, I guess, drag is almost like an exploration of yourself and your kind of identity in all its forms. I think that's such a thought I've never had before. I love that. I mean, it's really interesting. I am not a drag artist. It's not something I do. That said, I feel like I have dabbled. I feel like that's the correct way to put it. I mean, Car Crash this week, we've just done a queer cabaret that Bev performed at. And I guess like I hosted most of it in a corset and some fishnets, and I guess that's dragish to do something like that. But I certainly wouldn't describe myself as like a polished drag artist. But I think it's interesting because defining it as a career, as both of you have talked about, as like it's a job, but it's a passion. Is kind of one feeling towards it, as well as that kind of exploration of self and using it in kind of everyday uses as like art, as you were describing there, Missy.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I say for my drag that I don't think my drag is a character per se. It obviously is a different side of me, but I always think like I say it's like the creative side that's in my brain. And it's just like that creative strand where I get to, as Missy said, get to do whatever I want. And that's what I really want to do, because I really want to unleash all this creative energy of whatever I can just want to be, or whatever I can do anything without even having to second guess myself. And I guess that in itself is an exploration of myself, because I've never been able to do that before, and it's so freeing and like just so vibrant, I guess. So yeah, it's definitely, I forgot where I was going with that, but it was a very good point nonetheless.
It's true though, I guess. You hit the nail on the head there, that there's some sort of catharsis in it, as Missy said, but that almost disassociation, if that's not the right word, but that freeing sense of, yes, it's part of you what you're performing, but for some people, as you mentioned, it is a separate character, this kind of drag persona that they create. I think of like the likes of like Dame Edna Everage, who's for me, like when I was a child, that was like the most mainstream drag queen that I ever saw. Or Lily Savage, even in the UK as well. And they, both of them, are very much character personas that are separate from, I guess, the performer. Is that the right way to put it? I guess. Yeah. What about you, Missy? How kind of are you Missy all the time, or is there Missy and
Well, it has been the question for the past couple of months, because I mean I'm basically a beginner in this. I still consider myself as a baby drag, because until yesterday I had my first performance on stage, so I couldn't say that I had a proper performance before. But it has been a question, because from one side, as I mentioned, I'm exploring another part of me that I couldn't explore on a daily basis. So this is helping me to understand me a bit better. And on the other side, I developed Missy as a character. I mean, if you allow me to speak a bit about my background, I can explain a bit more why this is a character more than me. Well, I thought that it was more like a character. But anyway, I had the idea of creating Missy because I wanted to merge my professional life with arts, and I found that drag was the best way. For those that don't know about me, I call myself a scientist. I'm still not a scientist because I'm not doing proper research right now, but I focus mainly on things related to engineering, chemistry, water, etc. So I use drag as a way to talk about that kind of things. I have my own my Instagram show called La Tacita de Té. In English, it will be The Cup of Tea, where we discuss things regarding science, arts, etc. Everything that can go to the show will go to the show. Anyway, so I use drag for that. And I say, well, Missy will be my character to do this thing. But then I realized that actually, no, Missy is also a part of me. It's the feminine part that is allowing me to explore that side that I can't do on a daily basis because I mean, I live in Mexico. If you don't know Mexico, Mexico is very conservative. And we have the machismo thing here, and it's difficult to handle. So Missy is the way I can express it. And I'm learning more about myself. I learned a lot of things. At the beginning, when I started doing drag, I couldn't see myself with makeup. I couldn't see myself with nails. I couldn't see myself with that wig until I started like looking at Missy on this perspective and saying, okay, Missy is me. It doesn't really matter if it is a character, it's still me. Then I started to accept that that side of me exists. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
So it's an in between.
That's really, that's so interesting. I mean, who knew that this conversation would go this way, and that kind of like really, of course we accept drag as like an art form because it is, but that idea that it is truly like a reflection of yourself. It's an unpacking of the bits that are inside and what all that is. And I think something that you hit on there, Missy, is that drag has become and will always be and has always been a platform for more than just female impersonation. It's a lot more than that, you know. I guess we had a conversation before we were live here where you mentioned about kind of the old vaudeville style performance, the kind of cabaret-esque shows that were done. And I guess now you're talking about it as like a way for teaching science and kind of talking about, we all mentioned politics as well so far. I think art is intrinsically political. So yeah, I don't know, that's interesting. It is really a medium, like what's the way I'm trying to phrase this, like a means to an end almost.
It definitely is. I mean, as we talk about like the politics side of it, it's where it kind of like exudes from. I wouldn't say where it started from, but where it exudes from. I'm sure you was going to mention Marsha P. Johnson again, which we always should do because it's a very big driving force, and all the drag queens of why we have Pride now. So it definitely is like the means to an end, as you say, but it's also the beginning of something as well, because it's starting a conversation. It's like us as LGBTQIA people, we're always looking for an expression, maybe because it might be because of something that's happened in our lives, and usually we are minimalized, and you know, we face a lot of hardships that other people don't, and drag also does tend to help deal with them issues. So again, it's the exploration of yourself and everything else. But coming from the politics side and everything about like Marsha P. Johnson, who was a trans drag queen, which everyone can do drag, want to throw that out there, whether that be a drag king, drag queen, drag artist, whatever you would like to identify as, it's definitely a driving force and starting a conversation and just allowing yourself to be free and have no regrets towards that. Yeah, so I just think like it is like a political movement and statement to even do drag, because it's just going F you to the heteronormative societies that we live in.
Yeah.
Can I add something to that? Considering that he just mentioned, that Matt just mentioned that, oh, well, I don't add something. It is actually a statement, and that is actually true, because when I started doing drag, one of my first years, as I mentioned, I live in Mexico, very conservative place. I don't have to repeat this, I hope. And doing drag and getting a normal job, if they know that you're doing drag, it can become a trouble.
Wow.
So it's still a political statement, and especially because here, okay, side note, I used to work as a teacher. I say I used to work because the semester is just over, so I'm not teaching anymore, but that's good. It's a good rest. But being a teacher in a school here where they can know that you do this is an issue because the parents from the kids won't take it as a good thing. They will think that you are, well, you can imagine what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
And also because of that, they have to say the image. Like as a school, they have to say the image, and they will say something like, okay, you know what, this can't work anymore. And that is a reality. This happens very often here in Mexico, and not even for people that are doing that, but for people that are part of the LGBTQ community in general. So it's a political statement, at least from my part. Also in the scientific side, oh God, I can talk for ages about.
Oh, good. It's great. It's
how-
wonderful to listen to.
I thought that we have a time limit here. No. The scientific side for the LGBT community is very weird, especially here. I mean, in the UK, it's more open-minded. They have more groups. They give you more support. But here, the patriarchy, is that the phrase? I don't really remember. I don't recall the word. It's mainly dominated by men.
Oh,
Cis
patriarchy.
men.
Yeah.
Yeah, that thing. Well, that thing. So that is science here. How can we, as part of the LGBT community, have a voice there if they don't even pay attention to us? I mean, for being scientists, they should be more open-minded about that because science is an open-minded thing, but in reality, it's not. So not having a voice here, it's the worst thing ever. That's why me and my drag sister, Misteria Plastica, you ever hear about her? She's the crazy lady from the recyclables and that kind of things. We are trying to push forward this. We want to be a voice for those that don't have a voice in the science community because we know that we don't have it. At least there's not somebody to look forward, somebody to say, okay, if they can do that, then we can do it as well. And that is the political statement that we are trying to do as drag artists. Well, I think.
Yeah.
That's my idea. I'm not quite sure if it's working, but if it is working, then it's great. If it is not working, I still have to do some work there.
I feel like we have to believe it's working because, you know, I mean, drag is in the mainstream now more than it's ever been. And there are drag queens that are, I guess, doing things that weren't conventionally what you would know as like the female impersonation, the cabaret style kind of drag. I'm trying to think of examples, but I mean, like, for instance, even from the 90s kind of up till now, makeup campaigns where they are the face of makeup campaigns, or like literal campaigns for like HIV, when you're the kind of poster child of promoting like positive safe sex, or even further afield, like I think Nina West has like a Disney show coming out. That's terrible that I don't know more about it, but I think that's just so interesting, that you're absolutely right that there's a movement behind it. It's a statement to be a drag queen doing what you're doing. I love that. I kind of wanted to hit on something that Matt said there as well, that Missy was talking about with Stonewall, and I guess we forget how important drag is to the LGBTQ plus community, because without someone like Marsha doing what she did, Pride wouldn't exist. I mean, in 1970, the year after Stonewall, was the first ever Pride March in New York City. And it was a protest. It wasn't, you know, what we necessarily think of as Pride now. It's like celebratory, you know, we are who we are and we're proud of it. It was, you can't stop us being who we are. It was that kind of feeling of protest. And it's really, it speaks volumes that in countries like the UK, Pride Month is a celebration because it shows how far we have come, but only because of drag queens and the people in this community that really brought us all together. Because pre Stonewall, I think the LGBTQ community was very divided. Because I guess, I don't know who it was that mentioned that kind of heteronormative, it was Missy, wasn't it? Kind of lifestyle that came post-war. So yeah, I think without drag queens, we wouldn't be a community. That's just, I think that's my blanket statement. So politically, drag is very political. That was my ramble.
It definitely is, and it's great to see, like, Missy, if you're going and doing science and all this stuff, and it's great to see the broadness of what drag can be now. Obviously, oh, what was my point? But anyway, we're going to do that a lot today. It's just the brain keeps on having farts, but yeah, I mean, drag is so open now, and it is so valid, and everything in it should be valid. It's not all about being a feminine woman anymore. It's not about that. I think it's mainly because of the way gender has gone and evolved. Well, not evolved throughout time, it's always been there, but no one's ever actually been able to speak about it, which is what pre 1970, like, no one would speak about it, no one would care, no one would bat an eyelid. So that's why we have drag to, you know, fight the power of everything else.
I guess it's, yeah, it's really interesting, that kind of feeling of fight that comes with it all. That's the comment you made, Missy, of like, it, drag is a statement. Just doing drag is a statement, and I think you're right. No, I don't think you're right. You are right. But it's, you're kind of what you're saying, Matt, about in the 90s, about that kind of power struggle, I guess. And I think it was very apparent through the kind of the 80s as well. I mean, we're talking about times that none of us were alive. I mean, I was not alive in the 80s. I didn't live through the AIDS crisis, but you know, it's well documented enough that without like the pageant scene, without the ballroom scene, gay people wouldn't have really had any support through the at least the early days of the AIDS crisis at all.
Yeah. I think the ballroom scene in New York in the 80s and even before that, it was actually, I read something that said it actually started kind of in the 20s and kind of left a bit and then came back in the 80s. But that, it was such an important moment for the LGBTQIA plus community. And then that lovely as it was got recognized by Madonna, blah, blah, blah. And put it out into mainstream media, like, come on, Vogue, like, yeah, the house down. But it was just, again, another driving force for our community to really push it forwards and allowed us to be seen and give us representation that we deserve, really.
Yeah.
Again, another political statement, but there you go. That is, that's what drag is.
Yeah.
Political statement.
Born out of fire, almost. It's interesting. So in my mad research that I did before, and I want to make sure that I get her name right. In the 1900s, like way back, that what 1900s, there must have been dinosaurs about still then. But anyway, that was the worst joke I've ever made. There was definitely no fucking dinosaurs about. But yeah, in the 1900s, Julian Etigen, no, I definitely pronounced it wrong, was a drag performer who was in films and was the highest paid actor in Hollywood. Like, more more finances going towards this drag performer than there was Charlie Chaplin. And that is bewildering to me. I didn't know that till this morning, that even, you know, what's that, 100 years ago, there was a drag performer at the forefront of media and kind of pushing things through. That's, you know, it's always been here, just because we feel like right now there's this kind of renaissance period of drag, because there's lots of kind of media about it and television shows. Doesn't mean that it wasn't there pre, you know, even us talking right now about the 80s and 90s, it was there a very long time before.
Yeah, 100%. I done my dissertation on drag actually at Musical Theatre College. I had to argue that it was a postmodern art form, which in fact I argued quite well that it was. But I done a research on this drag performer, Charles Busch. They didn't have a drag name, they just went by the actor
Right.
name. What is it, like registered name? I can't remember what you called it. But they just went by that, and what they do, they were a theatre performer and they'd perform in drag old Hollywood movies,
Wow.
or plays or whatever it was that they wanted to do. But it's always been around, and it was very popular at the time. It was around like 50s. Don't mark my words on that. It's around the 1900s somewhere. It might have even been earlier, but a little factoid on that as well. They always said that the performance comes first, and the acting comes, and then the drag comes second.
Interesting.
So quite an interesting thought, I thought, and a different perspective on drag. Yeah, so it's always been there.
Yeah.
This perspective of it can be different from whoever you speak to. Yeah, so that's just a little side information.
No, it's juicy.
And obviously, like the whole Divine situation,
Right?
Waters films, like that. That's also more mainstream stuff, media out there that includes drag, and also a different kind of drag that people were used to at the time.
I think there's a lot that wouldn't exist without Divine, because those movies, they sell on that shock factor. And I mean, what's the one where Divine literally eats shit? And that was like, that was how they marketed that movie, and everyone went to see it because they were like, oh wow, she's gonna eat a dog poo. And of course they're clever, and they kept it to like right at the end of the film, so everyone had to sit through it. Not that I'm saying it wasn't worth sitting through, because I'm sure it's wonderful. But I think where drag was potentially until that moment, it was sort of the butt of the joke, perhaps, maybe more in that kind of comedy territory, until someone like Divine came along and was like, no, like you can be serious, you can be outrageous, you can be whatever you want to be. And you know, now we have science drag queens.
Wait, actually, now that you're mentioning this, I mean, I think that this will be more like a question rather than a statement. But I guess that this comes from where the origins of drag are, right? Because I mean, to my understanding, because I didn't do a dissertation on drag, of course, I don't really know that much about history. So to my understanding, it started as comedy, right? So I guess that was the idea from the beginning, that this thing, because I won't say that it was drag, because we don't know if they used that word at that time, I don't know, at least. This thing was made for comedy until that happened. Am I okay?
I guess, like, Matt, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's at least the Greeks, in terms of theatre and Shakespeare, you weren't allowed women on stage at the time, so men played women's parts in tragedies and comedies. So I guess the term drag is Shakespeare. I've heard various different origin stories about that.
I
Between like,
yeah,
go on.
I have as well. I was reading earlier because I was why else would I not be reading? But and it was saying exactly that, but I've heard that the term drag comes from dress as a girl. I've also heard that when the performers would put on the dresses,
They drag.
and it's like putting on their drags because the dresses would drag on the floor.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a grey area in terms of history and where it comes from, and maybe that's because no one wrote about it or whatever, because I don't know, but yeah,
Sure.
I don't know exactly. There's very many stories to it. Yeah, so I don't know specifically.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone does because I've heard lots of different things. So,
well, I think that speaks volumes to like drag being the medium in which other things are delivered, because I guess the thing that's then documented is this happened instead of this happened. Oh yeah, they were also a drag queen. You know, like I guess all the things we've mentioned in the last half hour are a bit like that. I wonder if that was the situation. You know, we'll document that this thing happened, but it's unimportant that it was a man dressed as a woman or whatever. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, I guess we never will know, because
I'm sure there's an academic that will watch this and is like, no, I know. And you're like, great, tell me. Comment. We'd love to know.
love to know. And we want to learn too. We need to be educated and be open to education. So
yeah.
Whoever does know, please let us know.
Can I tell you a fun fact about this? I mean, in Mexico, or at least in Spanish, as I know, we don't have a literal translation for drag. So we use drag as a word.
Oh.
However, at least here, the origin of the drag community is from the travestis. So we use the word travesti, which is travesti, as a synonym of a drag. But it's a bit confusing because there is a difference between travestis and drag queens.
Yeah.
And we know it. So we still use it, we still use them as a synonyms, but it's a very complex thing. I mean, there are some meanings behind one word and the other, but at least between the drag community is very, very well used, the word travesti. So we don't have a proper word. For me, knowing what drag means, it will be very good, because that way we can try to create a new word, maybe. I don't know. But nowadays we are using English and Spanish at the same time, so I don't think that will change very quickly.
That's so interesting that language has kind of developed the way it has. I mean, language is something I will never understand. I wish I could, but my brain, I'm too dyslexic. I think it kind of speaks a lot though to like drag coming through in the Western world though as an art form, that we've adopted that word maybe internationally. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know, because I mean way back, we talked about this earlier before we went live, like Cleopatra and other kind of Egyptian monarchy being drag kings almost, and kind of in lots of paintings, and what are they called, hieroglyphs? Yeah. Kind of presenting as male rather than female. So I guess that has a very long history as well. They wouldn't have had the word drag back then though, but can you imagine? Cleopatra would have been the most iconic drag queen. She is the most iconic drag queen.
She already is. But yeah, I think the whole play on gender, it always is maybe a little smidgen or a comment on gender, because, you know, why would she always portrayed as a man? it would be really interesting to know that. Obviously, we can't find the information for that, unless there is. Is it because women weren't seen as like that they could be strong, blah blah blah, they could lead a whole place or whatever she led, or was it because she wanted to? Like, where is the
Yeah.
so it's interesting to know that and be taught that, because why is there a little play on gender there, or
Yeah.
was there a little play on not exactly what she was, or
Yeah.
it's just very interesting, I must say.
I'm gonna entirely jump way forward from ancient Egypt all the way to the 21st century, because I think although it's so interesting to kind of unpack all this history, I don't want us to forget that like drag right now is in such an interesting place. It's more obvious and apparent, I would say, than I think it's probably ever been, thanks to things like social media. And yeah, I'm just interested to hear from both of you as drag artists, like what it's like now, because I mean we've all connected through Instagram. I should like preface by saying that, which is social media we've had in another topic, and it's both wonderful and hideous at the same time. But you're so accessible. We're in 3 different parts of the world at the moment, and we're still having a chat about this. So I'm just in. That was the longest asked question I've ever asked in my life. Basically, I'm trying to say, what is it like being a drag queen in the 21st century where social media is so important, I guess?
It's to be honest, it's difficult, kind of, because social media is social media, and it's always there to be used, and to use it, you must do all the stuff to go with it. So, like managing a social media, you always have to post, you always have to do this, you always have to do that, you always have to promote, you always have to do this, that, and the other to get the engagement and blah blah blah. So yeah, and I guess there is always that pressure of what everyone faces in day-to-day life, of looking at something and going, or someone, they're getting all that stuff, they're getting the gigs, they look amazing, I wish I looked like that whole kind of shebang and spiel. So it's important to like disassociate yourself with that, and just use it for what it is to be used, as I said, and just use it as a celebration. I mean, social media can be a great thing, and it should just be used as as a free platform for anything that we have talked about so far, whether that be politics or just sharing some nice stuff. So that's what it's like being a drag persona on social media, for myself anyway. That's how I'd like to view it.
Well, in my case, I think that it made it a bit easier, at least for the starters like me, because as people here will say, we were born with a smartphone in our hands. So we know how to use it, we know what to do. So it made it easier for us to get the engagement that we will take ages to get in a normal case, especially now during the pandemics. So social media is helping us to connect with others and to create more content. I think that is wonderful. However, I also understand that it's tricky because it requires you to have specific skills. Like, you need to know how to edit audio, how to edit video, how to edit photographies, etc. You need to know how to create a virtual performance. Yeah, sorry, got completely. A virtual performance. So it is difficult if you didn't do it before, especially for those performers that were a stage performance before.
Right.
They jump from one side to another could be tricky. I won't say that it's not difficult for everybody because, I mean, adapting to something new is always difficult.
Hmm.
I'm just going to say that it could become a really useful tool. I mean, social media is always a good tool. On the other side, also, it's like putting you in the spotlight
Yeah.
because you are I use a phrase for this. Every time I speak to my friends, I have a lot of baby drag friends, and I'm always telling them that they have to be very careful with their image because whatever they say will be used against them at any time. So you are, oh God, I forgot the name of this thing. A public person. We call it a public person. Everybody will know about you, even
Right.
if they don't know you, because there is information about you on the media. They can know about you, and if you did something wrong, then that's it for you.
Hmm.
Again, it's like what I was saying about my job and me doing drag at the same time. If they realize that I have my this alter ego who is missing the point and then start asking questions, then I will be in trouble. I know it. So you need to be more careful than any other usual time. I mean, I'm not saying pretend to be somebody that you are not, because that's not exactly what you're trying to do as a drag artist.
Yeah.
You're just using it as an expression, as an extension of yourself, not as a secondary alter ego that will
Yeah.
hide
Yeah.
your own personality. I don't,
Yeah, I mean, it makes me wonder. Oh, so sorry, just a technical thing. You've gone quite quiet, Missy. Um, briefly, just so you're aware of that. Yes, I kind of fear a little bit that with drag kind of having to use social media as much as it is at the moment, which we've talked about there, I fear that there's kind of becoming a little bit of a generational divide. Like, I've worked with a lot of wonderful older drag queens who do not know how to social media, and I wonder if the greats that we've talked about, like Divine, like Dame Edna Everage and Lily Savage, if they would be able to do drag as it is currently with their social media skills. I'm not accusing like Paul O'Grady and everyone of having terrible social media skills. I don't know what they're like, but and similarly for countries where where political movements are particularly key, for things like LGBTQ rights. Like I think of Hungary at the moment, that's just passed new laws that kind of prohibit. Essentially, is the equivalent of what Thatcher passed here in the 80s. And yeah, I fear that it's a platform that is not so accessible. I don't know if there's a solution to that, particularly. Can drag exist in a world where you don't have to post on social media? Of course it can, but
I mean, it did exist before, so
yeah.
I can tell you a bit about the scene here. Sorry, Matt, you want to go first? Sorry.
Oh, no, it's completely fine. I was just gonna say, like, probably as you was gonna say, like drag existed before. It's just now where we live in a world of like influencers and all this kind of thing. Like, social media is a big part of our lives, and yes, we will use social media, one because it's free, and two because it's the way you get stuff out there now. I mean, mainly every business has the social media to try and get maybe a younger crowd, but I know that my first ever drag show that I went to, the queen that got me up on stage, and like I was not in drag, but we was just there having a party, and she got me up on stage and made me sing the high note in Take On Me, and it was the best moment of my life. Yes, I have it on video. But they don't have Instagram, but they're still working.
That's brilliant.
So yeah, so it can happen, but you just got to find your way. I think it makes it easier at the moment now with social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here in our case, because I mean, yeah, we do have social media here. We have internet connections. We can interact with anybody by internet. But still, the best way to do marketing is one-to-one marketing. And a lot of people that are still on stage that don't have social media is because they've been doing this for ages, or they know this guy from this club or this guy from this theater, and they are still there. And you know, you see that very often in places like Mexico City, which is a very multicultural place, or I mean, here is not very often, but other big cities. Maybe in new places like here. For those that don't know, I live in Yucatan. Yucatan is in the south of Mexico. For here, it will be difficult because that culture, the stage culture, the drag performing culture doesn't exist until now. Or it did exist, but it was smaller. That makes sense.
Mm.
That would be tricky here. But Mexico City is easy.
That's really interesting that that kind of idea of like new drag cultures emerging. And I feel like we're now far enough in, we are 45 minutes in, that I can mention RuPaul and we can, you know, bring up Drag Race, which is for so many people what entirely their perception of drag is Drag Race. And I feel like part of the reason I ask about social media and the way that people kind of market is literally marketing, let's kind of use it in its blatant terms, is because I think Ru is like marketing genius. I think is the only way I can kind of describe RuPaul, because even pre-Drag Race, like, I mean, you have to applaud RuPaul for being the first on so many, like the first drag queen to be like on a makeup campaign for MAC, and you know, hitting the charts with Supermodel and being as famous as RuPaul was. But I think the other RuPaul is the RuPaul that's capitalized on what Drag Race is, and it has done a wonderful job with that and been very successful. But Drag Race presents a very specific image, and yeah, I'm just kind of interested on people's perspective of that, because I guess, you know, a lot of people might come and listen to this chat and be like, oh, no one's mentioned like Trixie Mattel or Bianca Del Rio, and you're like yeah, great, and they're wonderful, but there's also very wonderful local queens like the two that we have here.
Yeah, I think it's a interesting and quite a funny conversation to have when talking about Drag Race and people's perception of drag just based off of Drag Race. RuPaul even says on it at some point in the season, and just by the way, I love Drag Race. I love seeing the drag. I love seeing all of it. I think it's funny. It's my favorite show. I know a lot about it. But I think it's good to realize that the variety of drag on Drag Race is not necessarily that varied of what is actually out there. And also RuPaul says in the challenges and the way the challenges and stuff are done is based off of her life and her career and what she's had to do during her career. And that's all well and good, but like, that's your career and not like, that's your career. It's not necessarily going to be the same as someone else's. And the way I look at Juno Birch, for example, for those of you who don't know, transgender woman, does drag, about to tour the world, like amazing drag queen. Yeah, so it's just like, I can't remember why I mentioned, but like, she created that herself. That was my point. That was my point. She's created that herself and made her own kind of, you know, realm of drag, of what drag could be. And if you have a look at her drag, yeah, it's very different to what RuPaul comes to show on Drag Race. And I get inspired by Drag Race, and I'd love to see more variety on Drag Race, please. There's some amazing drag kings out there. There are also some people out there that are very vocal. When Ginny Lemon was on the show, she was like, they were like, oh, I just went on there to up my gig prices so I can make some more money. That was be all and end all. But yeah, I think the perception of drag shouldn't be Drag Race. There's a lot more to it, and a lot of it sometimes is said on the show, but hopefully, you know, we can get the ball rolling and, you know, support your local queens, and do all of that, because there's such a variety of drag out there, and we don't necessarily need to do Drag Race. Not saying that I'll never go on Drag Race, not saying I'll never audition, but like, it shouldn't be everyone's preconception of what drag is, and we need more drag in the media that is not just Drag Race anymore, because there's more to it. That was a long ramble, very sorry.
No, but very good.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I will add up something that, okay, I mean, for those that don't know, there are other shows about Drag Race, like Dragula, for example. Dragula is more like the other side of drag, one of the other sides of drag, where they will show you something that is more focused on the performance rather than the aesthetics of Drag Race. Like, I find it interesting because the platform for Dragula, it's more open-minded on that perspective than Drag Race. And also, I agree, they have to open the space for more people, for more drag performers, because drag is an art, and as an art, it has a lot of different kinds of being performed. So, I mean, I completely agree with that. This has been a conversation for a couple of times with my friends, especially because here in Mexico, we also have another platform called La Más Draga. La Más Draga is like the Mexican version of drag. Sorry, La Más Draga is like the Mexican version of Drag Race. And the issue with that one is, number one, I mean, I'm not saying that it's a bad platform. It's a really good platform because we don't have anything that actually portrays the local Mexican drag queens to the media. So that's the best way to do it, actually doing something about that. And that's great. But they have some of the mistakes that are made on RuPaul's Drag Race are actually made on La Más Draga. And we can't compare the Mexican drag with the United States drag because Mexican drag has a completely different background. I mean, yeah, we are influenced by the United States drag, but still, there are differences there. And we must acknowledge them if we want to do something more rounded, that's the word. And yeah, and also creating platforms, creating spaces to talk about these kind of things. Because, for example, again, I will put me on the spotlight again. Science drag is not something common. I started to know about it thanks to a friend, a very good friend of mine that is called Sassy Science. If you don't know her, you must know her now. She's a science performer. She goes to scientific conferences in drag and gives explanations of either LGBTQ things or science, and that's perfect. I love that. I fell in love with that kind of things, and that was what inspired me to actually try to do drag. I mean, yeah, I knew Drag Race because, I mean, who doesn't know Drag Race? But in reality, what made me say, this is the thing, the reason I want to do drag was her. So if we have more spaces, more media, and they start to know more about what we do as non-conventional drag performers, that would be the best thing to do. Still, we know that fighting towards Drag Race is like fighting against the Coke, so it's difficult.
Yeah,
Coca-Cola is going to be always the winner. Sorry for doing advertising or something that I shouldn't be advertising.
You're welcome. We're not the BBC. It's all good. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's in some ways it's easy for us to be kind of hypercritical of it because everything has its flaws. And both of you have bigged up kind of the positive sides of it, and I think I have to toot Drag Race's trumpet for being the queer show, for being a voice for LGBTQ topics. I think the urge from all of us is that we want it to speak more and speak more in detail about what these topics are, because there's 1,000 more things that it never touches on, and in terms of its kind of diverse pool of casting, even it lacks that somewhat, and I think it's to be applauded, but also as Missy just said, other platforms available like Dragula, and I think I do really see the future having a lot more drag shows in, because I think there is a lot more to be explored than what this wonderful TV show does do. I think this is why I want to hit on, and I think it's such a wonderful panel here to talk about this. Drag Race has kind of started its world takeover, having the international version. So we have one in the UK, and there's one in Holland, and the one in Spain started recently. And I particularly like the Spanish one because it has the most incredible conversations I've seen on Drag Race so far. There's only 3 episodes of it so far, but they've talked about kind of intersex queens and kind of gender in a more fluid spectrum that I just think there are conversations that telly show is having that I've not seen in Drag Race. But to hit Missy's point, now I'm rambling. I think it's so pivotal, those international versions of it, because it shows you that the one drag that we've been showing in America, in the Drag Race version there, is not what drag is all around the world. In Mexico, it's different. In even different parts of London, it's different, like in East London and in South London, and I think it's so important to kind of showcase that.
100%. I mean, it's great that we do have this whole world of Drag Race now. But like you said, I think it's great that they're having these conversations on especially the Spanish one, and then they sometimes do hit on it on the other ones. There was a non-binary conversation. There's conversations about like struggles from the LGBTQIA plus community. But I think we just need to get down to the nitty gritty of it all and really talk about that. And just really talk about the issues that we are having. So we just need like a broader spectrum of stuff that we need to talk about that aren't frequently talked about in our community, because we need more conversation within our community, because sometimes even the community is against each other, and I don't think that is fair. And as drag artists, we should like spread love and positivity and driving force for like the politics of it all again. But so we got to have them conversations in a wider spectrum rather than really just putting on like a nice dress. And like thankfully, like Simone on the American one done great political statements. Absolutely. And they were so fabulous in doing so. So it's just a bit more than like, love glitz and glamour. I love a rhinestone, don't get me wrong. I love it. We can't help it. But there's a deeper message and meaning to it.
Absolutely.
Now that you're saying this, you remind me of something that my drag mom said yesterday during the gig. My drag mom, when the first time that this performance was done, like 4 or 5 editions ago,
and now she was the one crowning the new winner in this one, because this is the second presidential one. The second presidential one. Anyway, yeah, she was talking about us because basically Mexico, we are the only two that talk about science so far, or at least that's what we know. The rest of them are very well hidden. We don't know. And she was saying exactly this, like, drag is not only to be pretty and to be a pageant and looking good, having a fierce makeup. No, drag could be something more. We can use it as a tool to achieve something different, to give something else to the community. It doesn't have to be science as we do. It could be anything else. It could be support. It could be to open conversations. It could be to open spaces. It could be to create something that will actually merge us as a community. And that's something that not a lot of drag performance are actually into, because they don't find that part interesting. And it's completely valid. I mean, as any kind of art, not all the arts will express something. And that's understandable.
Yeah.
But for those that have the sense that they want to do something else, I think that drag is a good opportunity. And yeah, that's what I will agree with that. And I think that we should use these kind of platforms for that. Sometimes it's tricky, especially when you're in a place like this, but sometimes it's easier, and we have to take advantage of them.
Absolutely. And I mean, check our privilege for a moment. We represent different bits of a community, but we're not that whole community. And I think that's why it's so important that TV shows and any media does kind of try to represent as many of those voices as possible. Because it's not my place to speak on behalf of people that aren't here. Yeah, I think, I feel very privileged to be part of this conversation, actually, because, it's sort of what the future of our community looks like, really. And I think drag will continue to sort of drive forward so many issues and kind of make positive social and political change, really. Drag presidents, drag MPs, that's what we need. Come on, Boris Johnson in a wig.
Actually, I think that there was some political something in politics in South America that was kind of into drag. I can't remember exactly, but that's something that happened in South America, and that's well known. But I don't remember the name. I don't remember the country. Then another politician from Chile, Argentina, I can't remember. His son is actually in drag.
Cool.
So yeah, it is happening, but again, it depends on the country, it depends on the media, it depends on how well this is accepted, because it's not the same for South America or Central America or Mexico or than to the UK or any other place.
That's it. So I feel like people have kind of summed up things really quickly and nicely there, but I just kind of want to give people kind of one last point to make, because I feel like a nice sort of way to leave this conversation is thinking like, what is the future? Where is drag going? What's it going to become? I mean, things evolve and they always will. Where do you think that drag will go?
I'm hoping that drag will just go like everywhere, and it'll be it won't be frowned upon anymore. It won't be like seen as this kind of, man in a dress, because it's so much more than that now, and it is an art form, and it is a performance art if you want to use it as a performance art, or if you want to use it for science, like, why not? It's beyond what anyone could ever think that drag could have been.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping it will just be everywhere, because it does have the ability to. People just need to give it the chance, really.
Love it.
Yeah, and 100% agree. I mean, the future of drag is to become mainstream, as they say in ballrooms. It must become mainstream because as an art expression, everybody will know about it. And at some point, everybody will accept it. I have a quick history here from Mexico. female impersonators at the beginning were treated as something shady, something not evil but not correct.
Yeah.
Then it was accepted. I mean, I can tell you that from the time of my parents going to clubs, and so that was a long time ago, until now, the things changed completely. And if you go to any bar, any pub, any club, you will find a female impersonator, and everybody will love it. Straight or not straight people will love it.
Mm.
Drag is something that people are starting to accept in some places. There's example of this Mexican drag queen called Miss Taboo. She is a non-conventional performer, and she said that her kind of performance wasn't accepted in the LGBTQ places, but in straight places, it was completely the opposite.
Yeah.
So I think that that is going to be the future of drag, being accepted everywhere and becoming part of the, well, not the fundamentals, but part of the kind of things that you will see in everywhere. We also have things like drag history hour, if I remember the name well, where drag reads story to kids, and so the people from Yucatan are doing an excellent job talking about HIV, for example. They are making performance for everybody on the town squares, so people can go and see them outside. So it's, I think that that's the future of drag, becoming mainstream and becoming something that everybody will accept. That aside, that is completely different to what will happen with the general LGBT community, because one thing is art, and the other thing is the struggles that we are suffering as part of the community. So maybe this one will be easier than this one, I think.
I so succinctly put, yeah. For me, something I would personally love to see is drag reaching those furthest corners of the world and really making positive change. You know, I think there's some countries that still have exceptionally questionable laws, not even just to the LGBTQ community, but to women, and to people's just human rights. And I do think that drag is probably one of the best mediums for that, to have positive change in some of these places. So I'd love to see like a Drag Kings of the World tour that goes out to like everywhere to Africa, the Middle East, to I see it worldwide, but who knows who will do that. And I want to continue seeing wonderful things like Drag Race and Dragula, kind of there being lots more versions of things like that that show off other parts of what this art form is and kind of what this community is. So yeah, I think there's so many options, so many cool things that could happen. You're a drag queen in outer space today. I love that. Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Missy and Bev. What a pleasure. Thank you. Also, I see that it's terrible because I have people up on the screen here, and then I occasionally just kind of swipe to check that everything's okay. And I can see that there was people kind of commenting there as we were chatting. Surprise, there was people watching. But thank you. Thank you for their support. Kind of watching this and engaging with this. Wonderful. Have a very lovely evening, everyone. Or afternoon, I guess, if you're in Mexico, or wherever you're watching this in the world. I guess you could be in a totally other place. But yes, thank you, and we'll see everyone again soon.